Hi, this is Leslie with Hyalan da Dahera. How's that? At the orientation to the TRC co-funding framework call on December 19th. And this orientation is the story of how several of us within TRCC have been, for the last year and a half or so, stepping back and taking a look at the network story of the members' collective work. And we've been doing it in several ways, using the movement strategy dialogues are also a way to do that. For the first time last year, Ben and a conversation weaving team did a Prezi of the collective wisdom of the group. And I've been developing a mapping framework that's actually based on the Holo Sapien model that came out of my PhD dissertation. So it's called the Holo Compass. And we've been using that as a framework to map the collaboratory work in a Kumu map online platform. And I also wrote a Talanoa report to the UN that I just submitted, working with a bunch of people on that in October. That's the story using the climate UN language. And in the process of story mapping, so the Talanoa report's our main story right now, and the Kumu map is the map. We're just, developing our ability to see our work in a common framework. And what's fascinating about it to me is that this common framework, this common story, is the story of whole community systemic change, and how do we communicate that in a way that can connect with the government and business and academic allies that we need to work with to get there from here. So for me, this is it kind of can seem like we're in the weeds, but really there's a big picture intention to be able to, one of the languages that we've used is to mainstream our movement. How do we do that? What does that look like? How do you connect with Wall Street? How do you connect with Silicon Valley? So there's lots of conversations that have been going on about that for years, but now we want to use this tool. So this is all a preface to say this is very early emergent work, and I look forward to working on it together. Hello, Nessie Zoom.
Sorry.
This is Leslie, who's just hopped onto the call. Somebody we can't hear. Oh, there he is. Hello.
Hi, hello. Sorry to be so late because I thought it was an hour before the call. I'm Diego.
That's totally fine. You are, your group is in a breakout room. Hi, I'm Leslie, welcome. And Ben's gonna.
Hi, Diego. I assigned you to the breakout. You should see that option to click it.
Sorry?
Do you see the option to join breakouts? I just assigned you to the room we're in.
Yeah, no, I have just come in because I don't know why on my calendar the meeting was an hour ago. So I thought, and then I realized because I think it was UK time or something. Anyway.
Yes, I realize you just got here, and so we're in a breakout. You should see the option to join a breakout in the bottom right.
Okay, breakout room 1. Okay.
Yeah, I'll see you there.
Bye, Diego. Nice to meet you. Okay, so you guys, would you like me to share my screen and walk through the Kumu map? Do you want me to just stop and answer questions? What would you like to do right now?
So I guess if I were to recap what I heard the intention is essentially how best to present this map and the story that goes along with it to basically, mainstream the idea and to popularize it and be able to talk about it. Is that right?
Yeah, that's like the public idea of this project. And there's also another major intention. So there's the public view, but there's also the network view, is to help the people who are doing the work to see ourselves better, right? And what our connections are. And so this Kumu map is the first time that people are able to see things like, I just created this theories of change map. So, people can see what are our theories of change. And we've been doing iterations of surveys that are populating the map. And I swear every time I do the survey, the framework changes for, how is it that we think about what our purposes are. And I developed an impact framework of language, of how we talk about it. How we talk about impact. What framework are we using? What frameworks are we using? Some people. Pardon?
Just one more thought is if you want to share links to things, or if they're on the map and you want to do it that way too. But I would love to see that, or I'm excited about that.
Great.
Yeah.
And I would happily do that. I will put a link to that in the notes. It should be in the Kumu map, but it's not there yet. I just changed how I showed the theory map yesterday. And I've been working really closely with Christina on this, obviously, and she's totally jazzed about the map. But it's enough to make your brain hurt. So let's just go there for a few minutes before everybody gets here.
Mm-hmm. That sounds good. And I'll just say that the way I'm hearing it too is that the way I'm understanding it is, having this tool being developed, it's going to be evolving while it's being developed, but it's useful to networks in a similar way to what I'm trying to create for collaboration also. So I'm just on the same, in this space of yeah, great. All right.
That's the goal. Now, I thought I brought the network. Never mind. I'll go find it. Here we go. All right. Yeah, from a meta perspective, Kala, this framework ought to work for any kind of systemic network. We're talking about, what's your why? Who are you working with? What are you doing for your assets? How are you doing it? Your strategy. And when is kind of a little funky. It's kind of tied to the what, but so actually let me just show you that. Let's look at the collaboratory right now. So the sidebar, Dahara, are you Kumu literate?
Not super, but I have seen a Kumu map before this one and
Okay.
interact with it. Yeah.
Okay. This is intensely data rich, kind of on the bleeding edge. So most of them don't have this kind of data, but each organization from a survey they've filled out has their mission, their story. So this is a video, and then we were just talking about the impact framework. So let's see what it looks like in the sidebar. So everybody fills in their basic info.
And this is all stored somewhere on some sort of a cloud-based database somewhere?
This map is fed by a hairy Google spreadsheet.
Okay.
So people fill out a Google form, and it kind of automatically populates the sheet.
Okay.
So, and yeah, this is already out of date here. So the first thing is why, what's your purpose? And we ask people to say, do you use any mottos, any principles? We're going to nix the anchor language for now. The Holo Compass model has an anchor purpose of, you know, and we'll talk about the frameworks in a minute. But then there's an impact focus. This is where food would be in focus, communications. Scale, what scale are you at? Scale is key. Who are your stakeholders? How do you do things? What are your assets? What strategy do you use? What are your impact indicators? That's a whole conversation about whether people, how people feel about indicators. Then your relationship to the network and your social URLs. So every organization is using the same impact framework in the sidebar. The little green dots are the lead assets for each one. So you can, browse the whole network this way. Any questions? Should I keep going on?
Yeah, a quick question. So when you're saying you're all using the same impact framework and the same impact indicators, I'm assuming then folks fill out. So essentially you're sort of using the same metrics system, yes?
It's not the same impact indicators. Part of this discovery process is the first thing is to find out what indicators are people using, what are they tracking, and then what are the common patterns to that. And that's the process that I went through in writing the Talanoa report. I had all this data that people filled out for what indicators are they using and what are they, and I went through and did a first pass of, okay, well, this looks like this fits in these buckets. Okay. And I'm in the process now, which is actually what this next hour is going to be about, really, is to look at what are the buckets, what are the common buckets that we have in terms of strategies or applications, or what are the program types that of the work that we're doing, and how does that relate to the kind of work that we're funding at what level as a network. I'm just going to show you before Susan gets here. I'm going to go back to So this overview map, when you go to this page, walks you through some of the top 3 patterns that, so we just looked around. This gives the directions for how you click on logos and how you look at the directory. Then there's another view of a showcase of the groups that we have recommended grant funding for, taking a little while to change it. So the first, and then it walks you through 3 patterns. The first pattern is think globally, act locally, collaborate regionally. And you can see in the map how some of the groups are local, they're on the ground. Most of them are regional. Some are national, a lot of them are national, and some are global. And so this gives a story about scale and being interconnected and regional tipping point. And then it shows you how to do this. Then we look at the purposes. If you were to categorize in 7 or less, you have to keep the numbers small so that people can relate to them. what areas are people working in. This is our multi-issue approach. And then networks. So it's very interconnected. The thing I wanted to show you guys today, which we have 1 minute left to do, is one of the buttons within this map, and it has a new separate view of its own, is what are the theories of change of the network. I'm loving this because I believe that the vast majority of the people in the network are not aware of the vast majority of these theories of change. So this is something that we want to share as a learning tool and conversation within the network.
So can you give an example of what a theory of change you're referring to, for example?
Yeah, so the theory is the why. Theory is one of these words that can mean many things to many people. So the just transition theory is a whole magazine. This is a well-developed theory of from banks and tanks to cooperation and caring. 32 pages. Framework for a fair shift to an economy that's ecologically sustainable. This is Movement Generations framework. Post-Carbon also has framework of these foundations. It's kind of a cross between theories and
there's a philosophy, the theory.
Philosophy, ethics. It's kind of the why behind what you do.
Okay.
Post-Carbon, and I thought Post-Carbon would consider that their theory, but in a movement strategy dialogue last year, they said, no, actually our theory is we work with early adopters, and they use the early adopter model here. So they have both of them to support innovators and early adopters.
So the theory is actually, you're saying it's the why and not the how, or more the principles that they based it on, the frameworks and the principles?
Correct. The theory's the why. It's the principles, the ethics. It's really it, and the values, you know, the heart behind what you're doing. Mm-hmm. But that's there are some people who call things theories that I consider to be more approaches, you know. So here, for example, 4R's, theory of transformation. I love this. Reimagine culture, resist domination, reform institutions, and recreate society. Those, in my worldview, are probably more like strategies, but just, and they use the word strategy, but just the fact that they're thinking about this on a meta scale is valuable.
So you'd probably put like indigenous 7 generations or permaculture as in those theories of change.
Yeah, actually the permaculture theory I just put on here last night, and it might not be showing up because I have to refresh the map. But yeah, the permaculture ethics are on here. People care, earth care, fair share.
Well, I know it's going to come up in some conversation soon, but the 4th ethic of permaculture, which has been developed especially in the Pacific Northwest, we've been for years building energy around it, but it's transition. And so when you look at that with the 4th ethic, it's actually a compass because you have 4, and transition is the as an ethic is acknowledging that we are in between, like we're on our way from, like in this transition from industrial era to a regenerative era. And so we have to use the industrial stuff that's still here, and we have to work with that, but we're doing it in a transitional way. So like when you make a design decision based on having to compromise certain aspects of your decision. The transition ethic helps you to realize, like, so if you're buying petrol, but you are using it to make a transition, that sort of thing. So anyway, there's a bit of writing around it. It's included in a few different books so far, but I want to pop that in there. It's a conversation because like lots of folks are steeped in the 3 ethics, but it's out there. So anyway,
so
just drop that in.
If you get a chance to send me your favorite link to it, we can pop it in here. This is the place to do that, right? I've never heard that before. And there are, oh gosh, at least 3 super active TRCC members who are permaculture based, that might be interested in realizing that if they don't already. One of them is NorCal Resilience Network, which is also a transition initiative. And Susan's the one who first started bringing the threefold permaculture ethics into the NorCal Resilience meetings. So, sounds like Susan kind of came and went. Susan, are you there? No.
Which are the other 2? Sorry, Leslie, NorCal and then?
Permaculture Action Network.
Oh, yeah, Ryan and those guys, yeah.
Ryan and those guys, yes.
Yep.
And, yes, love them. And Daily Acts. Do you know Trathan yet? Trathan and Carrie?
No.
Okay, so if you read the Talanoa report, they are the showcase example of a public-private people partnership that's anchored in permaculture, which makes them a 5P, I guess. But don't let me go there. They're a rockin' group in Northern California.
What are they called again?
Daily X.
Daily X.
DailyX.org. So, we can actually, since it's just us, take a few more minutes for questions on this, if there are any, before we shift into what does this mean for a framework to fund work in different buckets. Do you guys have any kind of?
So, like, let's say next year, if this gets developed well, one of the struggles I had coming into this new was not understanding all of the different organizations and what their purposes were, and all of the, different characteristics that you went through that each of them fill out in the survey. And I did not have the time to go through each of their websites and sort of understand all of that. So when it came time to campaign for the strategy circle and gather momentum around it, I wasn't, Ben and I had a few conversations, but is this something that you would put in service to that process, for example, next year?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you for saying that, because we actually we're in the process of upgrading the website, so it's not public yet, and I didn't even make the connection myself that the map might be a useful tool to people coming into the movement strategy dialogues for this purpose at the same time. Just didn't connect those dots, so sorry about that. And it'll all happen in right time, I guess.
Yeah.
You still seem to be finding yourself in good places, so.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
This is always good.
Yeah, I noticed Susan. There was a note from Susan that she's going to come back on 10 minutes from when she got off, which was about 5 minutes ago. So I think she is going to rejoin. Yeah, this is helpful to see where it's going. In particular, also that it's, I think, the learning curve of doing the new system with the it's been interesting. I had a conversation with Ben about that, like how to engage folks. Like I had reached out to people around forming a circle, but then I didn't hear back. And um, so it sort of was a little bit of a slow formation, but it's exciting to imagine how, to continue to see how it would be able to be more efficient, or and especially how the map might help people to search and find connections, or find the common collaborative capacities that are there. So that's exciting, and certainly I feel like we're in the middle of doing that as we go. Like I feel like emergence as a pattern is what's happening also.
Yeah. Let me kind of respond to that for a minute, but first, welcome Carrie to the room. Hi, Carrie.
Hey, everybody.
Hey.
Carrie, I just finished singing the praises of Daily Acts. I was going to connect you to Dahra. This is Carrie. Carrie and Trathan are Daily Acts phenoms. So, and Dahra is a permaculture phenom on the East Coast. So
Awesome.
he was just asking me who the permies were.
Love it. We just spent our weekend installing a permaculture garden for a tiny home village for previously homeless veterans.
Oh, that's awesome.
Been really fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
And Kala, do you want to say hi too? And Carrie,
hello.
do you want to say hi?
Hello.
I'm I'm a permaculturist up in the Pacific Northwest, so also part of the Permi and network and systems map geek crew, I guess.
Awesome. I'm in my family, with the tribe.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Kiala works with Christina up in the Columbia Gorge too. So yeah,
Awesome.
It's awesome to make the connection.
I have yet to meet this Christina. I keep hearing about her so much.
Yeah, rock star for sure.
I also sent you guys a link in the chat, which is actually an attempt that this chap Kirby, who's in Hudson River Valley, he put together to try. It's a Kumu map. This is where I'd seen my other Kumu map, by the way. And it's kind of an attempt at putting some of the Hudson River Valley food systems players on that map. I don't know. I haven't spoken to him in a few months now, so I don't know how updated it is. It's definitely beta, but yeah, I just thought since we had an intimate group, I'd share it with you guys.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Sure.
Okay. Are you ready? Let's dive into the conversation about a co-funding framework. Carrie was a member of the TRC Council this last year, and let me kind of share. I think I'm going to share my screen to begin with the questions at least. Hold on a second. I've got too many windows open here. There we go. Okay. Let me do this. Okay. Welcome back, Susan. Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us. This is we have two new great people, Kiala and Tahra, who are both permies, Susan.
Awesome.
Yeah. And Carrie and Susan, who are more in depth in the process. And I think we'll do kind of like a fishbowl. Well, we'll probably have Carrie and Susan and me go first in a roundtable of digging into the topic after I set the context. And then Kiala and Dahra can chime in maybe during the discussion. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, I'm only going to be on for a couple minutes because I wanted to catch the other call at 11:30.
Okay, well then we are going to make sure we get your 2 cents in before you have to go. I wanted to share just this context that we're really talking about the big picture of the kinds of whole community systems work that we're doing that we're doing and we're trying to support through funding as a collab short-term working group that's typically been funded for 1 to 5,000 over the years, and a co-project, which is a more extensive grant cycle process, where the collaboratory is not a foundation. We don't have money, but we have a partnership with the Threshold Foundation that I'm also a member of. For transparency, I'm a bridge between the two. So Threshold has a pool of money that we raise, and some of that each year goes to grants to support thriving resilient communities. And the council, that's mostly made up of people from the field, including Carrie and Susan, with a couple funder reps, recommend how that funding gets spent. So, and the grants range from 7,500 to 30,000 range, and they go to usually one group, but sometimes several. And what we're looking at here is a whole bunch of different issues of, bleeding edge issues of how do we create a better framework to describe the work that we're doing and the relationship between the smaller groups and the smaller funding and the larger funding, and what kinds of things do we fund, to make it easier for everybody, both the people participating and potential funders, to understand what's going on. And right now we have an issue where Threshold just raised its minimum grant level to 15,000. So we don't have a mechanism in place right now to fund in between about 1,000 and 15,000, and that's a pretty big gap. So that's the big picture. And I came up with several questions. Carrie and Susan, did you have a chance to look at those? Should I read them? Was that a nod?
I haven't looked at them yet.
Okay. Well, then let me just kind of read them through, and let's take a breath and settle into these questions before we open the roundtable. I'm really excited about the chance to think about this together. This is going to be an ongoing conversation over the next month, probably at least. So the first question is, how do you describe the buckets? People use different languages, the strategies, the programs, the applications that people in this movement are doing through their organizations that TRCC has been funding or should fund. And are there tiers or levels of funding for different kinds of projects? Should we frame them in a clearer way? Like Negev has 3 levels of grants that it funds. It calls them all grants, and there's ranges that they fund at 3 different levels. And do we make them all one process or keep them as 2 separate ones? And then there's some other kind of more detailed questions, I think starting with 3 is probably a good place to start.
Can you clarify the applications in the first question?
That's a word that Bart Weston used that I've never heard used before. But it makes sense when you think about it, as from an engineering perspective. So an application is, how do you take your theory? This is how I interpret how Bert's using it. How do you take your theory of change and apply it to to work that you're doing to reach your stakeholders? I call it your strategy, or your asset, your program, your tool, your training, your convening structure. What is it that you're creating? It's your what that you're doing.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. It's kind of your how.
Leslie, a clarifying question.
Sure.
So if threshold is only funding grants that are 15,000 and more, then how would we then structure if we do want to fund grants for less than 15,000?
So good question. Two ways. We could do what we were talking about possibly doing last year, which is to give TRCC a bigger grant and have it contract to the groups directly. Or we could, one of the disadvantages to that is that we get charged a fiscal sponsor fee. Or another possibility is that Aaron Tanaka at Center for Economic Democracy has a funding vehicle that lets him fund smaller grants or smaller amounts. And we haven't gotten into the details, but he's open to that possibility. And that may serve us too. And Center for Economic Democracy could also receive donations more easily from other funders or foundations than Threshold maybe could, or even than TRCC could. Because the Collaboratory is not a foundation, like I said before. It's a fiscally sponsored project. And it's a fiscally sponsored project of a nonprofit called New Stories, which, while wonderful, is not set up to be a foundation kind of funding structure. All that we can do within TRCC is to do, what we call contracts.
Right.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and so the contracts potentially could be set up as the smaller proposals.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I like that. I think that one struggle has always been that it's only once a year that we're able to receive grants. And so if there were a structure whereby a couple times a year there would be opportunities for smaller grants, and I would say really focusing on the collaboration, the collaborative opportunities like you've done with the collabs, I think that could make sense and just really encourage the collaborations between TRCC members.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Awesome. Do you anything else you want to say in the roundtable, Susan?
I like the seed, grow, harvest. I think that, and kind of align with the ideas of tiers. I think that makes a lot of sense. Allowing for smaller, organizations that are just getting started out to ask for funding that's kind of a smaller amount. And then the single level organizations versus collaborative. Yeah, that's a tough one because in the past, a lot of the proposals that have been collaborative have gotten the same amount as the single level organizations. And so perhaps could consider looking at, okay, we're going to fund one or two organizations that are, or one or two proposals that are collaborative, and there'll be a bigger amount. So, because I think, again, encouraging the collaboration, I think would be really great.
Okay.
Um,
And do you have a minimum amount in mind for, like, if that was its own tier?
right. I don't know, like 25 maybe.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about the, the small versus the bigger process? Is there a difference between a contract that's like a because you've done both.
Yeah.
So, where's the process line between the simplicity of a collab and the complexity of a grant?
Yeah, I mean, the grant definitely the process is definitely more complex, and the collab is like, to be honest, in the past years, it's been a little confusing as to what the process is and who exactly is deciding. So I think just just making that a lot more clear, and having clear deadlines would make a lot of sense.
That's part of what we're here for.
Yeah.
We know that the never mind. There's a whole history behind that, but what would you like it to be? Is what we're asking.
What would I like the process to be? I would say twice a year, up to whatever what kind of budget do you have for the collabs? I think, is it like up to 3,000? And a simple grant proposal, then we know who is deciding it. The proposal.
Do you think that the council should decide who's getting collabs too?
If they have the capacity for it, because that would be another phone call, right?
Yep.
It could be a subcommittee that decides the collabs. I think maybe not, maybe not the council deciding the collabs. Maybe it's just a smaller group. The council, we have our hands full. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Do you think that groups who are funded for co-projects should also be able to get funded for collabs?
Yes. But I think that the collabs, again, should be collaborative.
Mm-hmm. So not, for example, incubating a program within an organization.
I don't. Maybe not. I don't know.
So, like, can I give you?
Not, but
yeah, like, so some of the ones that have been incubating a program within an organization, the collab has had the funds to reach out to other experts and
sure.
convene people about, like, asset mapping, for example, was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and indicators was another one.
Mm-hmm.
And they had the capacity then to do that.
Right. Yeah. As you can see, I'm sort of torn. So not, I could be persuaded either way for sure. Love to hear what other people say. I'm gonna jump off the phone, go to the next TRCC call. But I just kind of wanted to weigh in on this process a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah.
can I ask you one more question before you go?
Yeah.
Do you think there's a difference between, do you think there's a different, so for funding between 3,000 and say 10,000, are there two tiers for like less than 5 and more than 5?
Yeah. 0 to 5 and then 5 to 10. Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure. Maybe that's kind of a jump, you know. I always think that, you know, if it's not a big amount, there should be a lot less paperwork for sure, and a lot simpler of an application.
Yeah, what I'm testing for is where's the transition for you between small and big?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say more than 10.
Okay, so 10's the transition point.
I think so. Probably, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. These are just my opinions. I don't have, you know, I'm sure other people have different opinions.
No, that's cool. That's what we're here for.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. I see my name blinking there. Would you like me to go next, Leslie?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I forgot I was still sharing the screen. You guys have been having to watch me take notes. Shoot.
It's great.
Do you want me to keep it up there?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I think. So would you like me to go next? Are you taking notes in the TRC co-funding framework Apples and Oranges challenge?
Workspace.
I'm
Oh,
in that document, but I don't see the notes you've been taking.
they're down under, what is that, page 3? Page 3.
Gotcha.
It's hard to facilitate and take notes, so
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I think I'm in a different document. That's why.
Okay, I'm in the other
probably here.
document too. If you want to paste the link.
Yeah. Where's the chat? Here we go. Yeah, Ben sent me this document about 5 minutes before the call, so sorry, I forgot to put it in.
Oh, good. Okay.
Because I have a separate workspace where I'm going to be integrating call notes from today, plus another call, plus online comments. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay. So for reference in the future, the TRC co-funding framework Apples and Oranges Challenge, that document is not going to be a living document. That was just to prep us for this call. Or should we refer back to this?
Well, no, that's going to be probably the ongoing workspace. This is the call notes just for this call.
Gotcha.
When we were reviewing the grant criteria, we had like 4 or 5 calls and plus, online comments. And so that was the best structure I could come up with for how you keep straight what happened in all these times and then pull them together in a workspace and then create a proposal and blah, 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 blah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, cool. Well, you do an amazing job.
Well, I'm mentioning it because if somebody's got a better idea, I'd love to hear it. The methodology is emergent too.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, it would be helpful to link these 2 docs so that we know.
We will.
What to go to for what. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I will. The links to all the individual ones will be in the workspace and
awesome.
vice versa.
Okay. And the workspace is Slack? Or no, that's the...
It's another Google Doc. I think that's the one you were in.
Okay. Gotcha. Great. So I also like the kind of 3 buckets, as the example is for NEGEF. I think, I don't know what you'd name them, but the kind of phases of evolution that I could see helpful differentiating between would be kind of a new, like a inspired idea in action bucket that it's still getting off the ground. They don't necessarily have a track record, but it's a really great idea. And we want to, put some funds behind seeing it lift off. And then a middle could be, a few years of track record, and still testing the waters, but having some good outputs. And then a third could be really strong track record and continuing to innovate specific programs to meet the emerging need.
Ooh. Nicely wordsmithed.
So that we're rewarding organizations that are pretty well established, but are still operating with that fresh lens of innovation and listening. And they're not just like, cool, we figured out something that worked. We're just going to put on our blinders and charge forward and make that go. But instead, like, cool, we know something that really works, and we're always going to be looking for how to make it better and adapt it and innovate it and tweak it to the changing environment around us. And as we continue to learn, we integrate that too. So those are kind of the 3, with the fresh lens of innovation. Exactly. So I think rewarding all 3 of those would be great. And going back to the other questions, do the different buckets automatically fit in different tiers? I think it depends on, more the life stage than what bucket they're in. I know that gets hard with the comparing more new economy organizations with like DailyX. But I think if everybody's meeting the criteria that we've drafted, their strategy might be doing it through a new economic model or through a transformative garden, but the criteria are still being met. I think the apples to oranges might be a little bit difficult on the stage of evolution, where you're comparing folks with a really strong track record with folks who don't have that. It still is hard to compare when the programs are very, very different categories. So I think, I think we tend to be drawn towards the strategies, certain strategies. So I think just being aware that the emphasis is really on the criteria, and the strategies might differ, and that's okay. And so, but if we do end up, if a certain strategy tends to be really popular and that's what we end up only wanting to fund, then I think that's a bigger conversation of, are we strategy specific, or is it really just the criteria and anybody who's meeting that is on the same playing field within that evolutionary stage. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, can I ask
Please ask clarifying questions.
Yeah, no, this is great.
So thinking out loud. Well,
let me ask about strategies first. 2 questions. Mm-hmm. What strategies do you think we're drawn to?
I think I don't know. My lens could be I think we evened it pretty well. I think definitely the new economy ones are pretty fresh and innovative and can be very, can draw a lot of attention sometimes, but I think they're also awesome. I know I'm drawn to them too, and integrating that lens. So I'm not completely sure. I think it'd be interesting to look back at the past ones and see if we are drawn or not, because I remember a call on the criteria conversation that somebody mentioned that we only fund certain types of organizations, and you actually said, no, we don't. If you actually look at it, we're something else. And so I think our biases can sometimes blur what's actually happening from the data perspective. So I'm not sure if we are leaning towards a strategy or not, but I think it would be worthwhile to look at past years of funding to just do a quick double check of what our patterns might be.
I'm trying to do that. Historical reference material.
Oh, beautiful.
What have we been funding? This
You're
was
so
actually something that I would, it's a project, and I would appreciate help, but I don't know how that's going to happen over the holidays. But if that's something that you're interested in, let me know. That would be a carrier circle kind of thing to do. Carrier circle is the council, just for Dahara and Kiala, the carrier circle is the governing body of the collaboratory as a network. And the council is the governing body of the grant recommendations. And there's some overlap. It's kind of a holocratic model.
Yeah, that's definitely, I love that you're already on everything, Leslie. Yeah. It's amazing. So on top of it. So, yeah, I think the overall summary of what I'm trying to say is I think the buckets should be more evolutionarily bucketed rather than strategy bucketed.
So here's the dilemma.
Mm-hmm.
Do the new groups that don't have funding, that need to launch and get off the ground, do they get more or less money than the more established groups that have a more track record, that have an easier time to get other funds?
I think it's a case-by-case conversation. And that lens of, do they look like they can deliver and they've scoped their project realistically, is really important, because you can have an amazing idea and you've scoped it at $10,000 and we read it and it's like, that is a $500,000 vision, which is totally an awesome vision, but we don't think your scope will allow you to deliver what you want to deliver. So I think, I definitely want to support those innovative ideas because I think they're really essential. And I would just take it case by case on how we think they can deliver and how realistic their plan of action is.
So so just brainstorming here, and I guess which gets into the discussion more. Do you have anything else to add for just throwing thoughts out before we get into the discussion?
The other questions. How to better support funding in multi-organization versus single org-led projects. I think just the simple short answer to that is probably if there is a multi-organization effort, they would get more funding. So that it doesn't end up kind of, as Susan said, penalizing each organization who now has to split the funding with 2 other partners. So that's my trying to keep myself brief and concise as well.
No, that's great. Thank you. And I will actually just say like ditto to pretty much everything.
One question in looking at your historical analysis, it's totally awesome. Do we have like categories of different strategies? That seems very challenging to do. So
that is, I think, I mean, that's what I'm trying to develop, right? And this is a vehicle to do it. I came up with some for the Holocompass framework for the Kumu map.
Yeah.
And they're kind of, I think on the next call, maybe we might look at them in more detail. I think once I have more of a historical context set up, it might make sense to look at what the language is for each of those strategies.
I can imagine it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
So
well,
I want to recognize
it just takes some time to look at the patterns. So I realistically, I'll probably be doing the next pass. But I expect that by the time we get into the, nomination review and the retreat in January, we're going to have a lot more really good feedback on it. So, my main dilemma with what you're saying, that I'll just throw this question out there and then see what Dahara and Kiala have to add, is when you talk about, and then we have this problem all the time, when you talk about the tiers being based on the life stage that you're in, I don't know how to evaluate organization or, funding proposals on a case-by-case basis in that situation, because you can't say, well, newer groups get less money and more established groups get more money. Like, how do you base the tiers on the life stage?
I didn't necessarily associate it with different tiers of funding. I thought of it kind of as, say we had $90,000 to give away, 30,000 for one bucket, 30,000 for another bucket, and 30,000 for the other bucket. And then within that bucket of life stage, people get different amounts, but the total given to that life stage is still 1/3 of the whole. And yeah, that's sorry,
clarifying that
part. Yeah, so that the same weighting of how much funding the overall bucket is giving is split evenly between the 3 stages, and then within the stage, the strategies that look the strongest, that we're most feel will be most successful, would get, maybe we have 3 tiers within that, 15. I think maybe, I don't know what those tiers would be, but you could set up, I really liked the tiers from last year. I didn't experience it the year before, but it did seem good. So you could set up 3 tiers within each bucket, but each bucket has the same amount as the other 2 buckets.
Yeah. So you're talking about it sounds like when you say multi-organization efforts should get more funding, that's probably a multi-organization tier too, right?
Funding bucket, potentially. Or a tier within a bucket. Yeah, it could, but either way, it would be its own. Oh gosh. I'm envisioning buckets with little ladders inside, and it's quite hilarious in my head right now.
Okay, no, so say that again. So you have
so you have I'm in my head, my bucket
ladders?
my bucket is like an evolutionary stage. So you've got early inspired idea bucket.
Okay.
You've got a few years off the ground and strong track record and innovative idea bucket. And
Got
each
it.
one gets the same amount from the whole.
Mm-hmm.
And then within each bucket, you've got the 3 tiers, like what we did last year of the 8,000, 10,000, and 15,000, which I know it's different this year with the 15,000 minimum, but so you'd have to set that up accordingly. But 3 tiers of dollar amount within each evolutionary stage. And then the multi-organization could be its own tier within one of the 3 buckets, although that makes it really hard if you've got an awesome example of a really established organization incubating a smaller one, so maybe they have to have
Bingo.
their own bucket.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But it isn't saying we give more money to the startups. It's the same across the board. It's just within that. That's the current thing. Yeah. But maybe we do. Maybe we give more to the newer bucket. I'm open to that too.
Okay. It's raising lots of questions. So Kiala and Dahra, please chime in. If you have anything that you'd like to say. Thanks for listening.
I guess I just want, because I'm noticing it's obviously a feedback process, and I was just wanting to understand what the original guiding principles or design principles were when you guys, was it a certain philosophy, a design system that you were, again, what those principles were, and then do you evaluate the suggestions against those initial principles to see how well they match up?
Yeah, we have had a kind of a basic set of grant criteria for many years, and we just went through a whole, in fact, I think that was one of the calls that you were on. We were reviewing the grant criteria, and we just changed them. But there's still enough wiggle room within the grant criteria. It's kind of a fuzzy line between like funding guidelines and grant criteria, and it's that fuzzy line that we're working with now. But there is a set of grant criteria that I will put in the resources that just got posted, just got released this morning at like 7:30 a.m. So okay,
press.
Hot off the press.
The press.
Good question.
And when you guys were first building these, did you sort of use like, for example, if I think of permaculture, since that's most shared within this group, right? If I think of my permaculture principles, and I'm like, okay, if I'm thinking of stacking functions, which one of these is really doing that? And so it has, let's say in permaculture, you're always looking at, it's a circular system, right? So how are some of the funding criteria supporting creating, like the current process that's there right now, whichever way that may be value, whether if they're doing really well monetarily, do they put some money back into this process, or you know, whether it's through mentorship, or what is their value back into the system as well? What value do they generate back into this system? And I'm sure that, you know, you guys have all, like, I will need to read the criteria, but just trying to understand if it was originally formed on some principles behind that too, that you guys used.
Short answer, we had 2 relatively well-funded groups in the pool this year who backed out of the pool and withdrew their proposals in order to leave enough room for the rest, to have other groups be able to have more money. So, you know, we're trying to develop a funding ecosystem. Yeah. And that's exactly what we're developing here. What's a more systemic model for funding that feeds the whole?
Yeah. I had a few more questions, but I'm going to leave Kayla. I don't know if you had, I can't see you, so I don't know if you have questions or.
Yeah, maybe I'll share a little, or and then you can come back in. First of all, yeah, I just really appreciate the opportunity to listen in, you know, kind of that fishbowl style, and be getting caught up on the approach. Having definitely some thoughts similar to Dara, that around reading more on the criteria. So I look forward to checking that out. And, you know, sensing into collaborative and thriving oriented, you know, projects as some of those, you know, criteria or some aspects of that. And from a design perspective, I really feel into the need to create structured, or the, you know, wanting to have a structured process, but then also to have that be a pattern so that it can be a living, you know, an adaptive pattern. So yeah, I think of patterns in relation to that. Yeah, I think some of it is also like bridges to larger funding, or seeding things that are patterns that are going to have an impact, and then connecting this to that impact framework, or, you know, connecting it to the process also of circling it back around to where following the projects through, you know, and seeing how that impact is playing out, and having that be visible or visual oriented. Right now too, one of the things I have is a curiosity around the circle, and how much the folks that are involved in the circles or the council are showing up, or what level of responsibility they have to show up, or how that is, because that seems like one of the challenges, maybe, but I don't know, so I'm just observing. But that's so I'm excited to keep learning more, and that's there. I don't have any more well-formed like questions necessarily, but I'm appreciating the pull in.
Thanks. Just information. Council members' time is paid by threshold as a contract. So we have a contract where we get money to pay for their time. I mean, and that has evolved over the last few years. So there's yeah.
So all the guys that all the groups that have been funded are all become automatically council members?
They're all everybody who has an RFP is invited to become a council member. Not everybody does, but, you know, we follow the deep democracy principle of those who are affected by the decisions get to help make them. So, and that's like so edgy you can't even know. I mean, there are groups that do collaborative or democratic philanthropy with partners, but there's generally a rule that they can't have you know, their own grant on the table, or there aren't funders in the room, or both. So,
And how do you overcome that competitive aspect? So let's say if they are in the running again for getting a grant this year, what is their incentive to be also part of it? Because they're probably very much related, and there is collaboration that could be had with another group that's also in that same space. Let's talk about, like, for example, food systems, right? And you've already got I'll just take an example because the only one I can think of right now is Food Solutions. If Food Solutions was a collab member and council member who'd received grants last year, it would really serve the next maybe person who's trying to figure out both just network and grant funding for a food system generation somewhere else, to have them be present. But what is their incentive in coming to the table if you're actually now, in the same pool of, in the same category and buckets, and so there's limited resources there. So why would they be supporting that other group or being present to their? Of course, these are all good people who care about the evolution of the ecosystem. Like, thankfully, you don't have, they're all good council members, right? They are. I know them because I know personally folks. I mean, I know Ryan Rising and those guys, and and I know Ben, and I know you guys. But I'm just wondering, like, how that works.
it's a very good question, and just recognizing we're at the end of our call time, so I want to be able to honor people's time and say goodbye shortly. I would say the short answer to that is there's a couple of them. First, it's all everything's based on community and community relationships, right? So you stay in relationship and you figure out how to share the resources that you have the best way you can. And the second thing is we have to, just like we have planetary limits, we have to be real about our funding limits at this point and keep the number of like grants on the table small enough that we can handle it, right? And that's the discernment that the council has to do every year of how big can our tent be. And this is one of the reasons, this is a constant, question, breadth versus, depth, and what needs the resources this year the most.
Yeah. And I'm deeply appreciative of, the complexity. I mean, I just got a small window into it, right? So thank you for opening this up.
Yeah. So more flexibility in the structure and the pattern lets us be able to, dance with that. So Thank you for showing up to help us co-create this.
Thank you so much. I remember my first call on the complexity stepping in. I was like, oh my gosh. So, and that wasn't very long ago. Leslie, you do an amazing job holding it all together. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Right.
We'll be in touch.
Right.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.